Ivan Blake, host of the Restore the Republic show, and today we're going to be doing a few gun how-tos for the listening audience out there. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be field stripping, cleaning, and honing the bore, and of course putting it all back together on a Maverick 88 12-gauge shotgun by, of course, Mossberg. It's exactly like a Mossberg 500, but with a little bit different features, and this model actually has a smaller barrel. And it's set up more or less for a home self-defense shotgun. So sit back, watch along, and we're going to take you through this step-by-step on how to do it. Here is we want to take a 1/4-inch Allen wrench and get the grip off the back of the firearm. And this grip is designed to absorb recoil, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. When it's in its position, and it's really, really hard to do because the springs in this are very, very tight. But this grip will actually slide back and forth and help absorb some of the recoil because obviously this is a pistol grip shotgun. And recoil on it with some pretty stiff loads, especially self-defense loads, can be very, very damaging to your wrist. So now that we got the buttstock off, we got to start by removing this front cap. Of course, always you want to check and make sure the gun's unloaded. As you can see, I always do the finger check, make sure there's no shell in there. Obviously, it's my gun, so I knew it was unloaded before I started, but that should just be made known. Take this off. If you're wondering about the coating that's on here, this is a Cerakote, a coating I did on here. Cerakote is a, it is a ceramic-based coating. And that's how you get the barrel out. Ceramic-based coating that's corrosion resistant, and it can resist a lot of different chemicals and everything like that, especially rust, which is one big key thing we have problems with down here in the South. So now we need to remove the trigger guard. The way you do that, you get a little punch, whatever I did with that. There it is. Simply pull that pin right there. Trigger guard comes out. Now you want to take the shell holders out. That. Now we can lift this bolt guide out. This comes out. Your pump. You have your bolt carrier group and the bolt. Of course, you have the shell thrower, or whatever you want to call it. And now in here, there's a little tiny piece in there, which is the, I believe that's the ejector that the shell will hit on the back of to eject it from the firearm to help kick it out. So that's just a flathead screwdriver. We can stick that in there and take it out. And one thing with guns, a lot of people don't understand is always make sure you have the right size screwdriver. Obviously, this one is just a standard screwdriver head, so it'll come right out. But when you start dealing with smaller screws, it's better to have screwdriver bits, and that way you can go through and select which one best fits the screw. Now, we could take this off right here, and be careful because this little mag tube can be damaged very easy. And if you damage it, the chances of you getting it to ever feed shells properly again are very slim. That's that. And now, obviously, we have this tactical rail on here where I was talking about where if you try to fit a normal screwdriver in here, it's just not going to fit, and you'll end up damaging the screws. But we're just going to go ahead and leave this rail on. There's really no point in us taking it off. But that's how we do it. Part came apart just that easy. I will shoot a separate video, and I actually might just include it in this one, of how to properly get this apart, because one thing with these trigger packs on these firearms is they're very, very difficult to get apart. Well, they're easy to get apart, but getting them back together and getting them to work properly once you get them back together is very, very difficult. So I might do a quick tutorial on how to actually strip this out, get the springs back in the proper position. Because I know a lot of Mossberg owners, if they do this and they take these apart, The problem you run into is Mossberg's not going to tell you, nor will they even send you a diagram on how to get this back together and where the springs go. So I'll go ahead and show you how to do that in this tutorial in case you do take it apart, what have you. Springs fly everywhere, and then you're left with a gun that's unfunctionable, which honestly, I'd rather show you how to do it yourself because that way you're more self-reliant. But that is pretty much the disassembly of any Mossberg 500 or a Maverick 88, since they're basically exactly the same gun, essentially. We're going to work on this next. Before we start doing this, I'm going to say that the one key mistake I see a lot of people make, whether gunsmiths or even just gun owners, before they go taking something apart, they usually never take pictures of it. And I think this is key. I mean, you need to know where all the springs go. You need to know how they function, because in this step, if you end up not putting this back together, your firearm is not going to function properly, and it can even function in an unsafe condition, which is very, very dangerous. So before we get started, what we're going to do is I'm going to try to get this real up close and personal so you can kind of see how everything functions here. Here's obviously, this is the hammer. This is the release right here for the pump once it's in battery and chambered. This is what allows that. This basically locks it in place. And this piece right here is what allows that when it's locked forward. You push that up, and that way you can slide it out and extract the round. Sorry, I'm not very, very up on my technicals today. It's just after Thanksgiving when we're cutting this video. So there you have it. And then the hammer spring, obviously, is right there. Then there's a couple other springs. This is going to be your trigger spring right here. It's part of one of them. Actually, no, this works on this Sear. That's the Sear Spring. Your trigger spring's hidden in there. There's one back there. And then there's also a few other springs in here that work in unison. Then there's one in the front for the Sear too, and it's really, really tricky. So we're going to start by going ahead and taking this apart. And I want you to notice right here, don't try to push this pin through this way because those are locks for that pin. So you want to push it from the opposite direction of those indentions. Hold it down like that. Pull out your punch. There's your hammer spring. There's the plunger for the hammer. Okay, now that's out. Now we can start with, take that out. Look how dirty that is. I mean, and it is good to go through your trigger pack from time to time and clean it, because a lot of people that own shotguns, one of the biggest problems they end up having is the fact that their shotgun's just dirty. And you know, gunsmiths can charge an arm and a leg just to, I mean, 40, 50 bucks, 20 to diagnose, and then another 30, 40 bucks to clean your shotgun just because it hasn't been maintained properly. So what I just did in this step is I took it out from this lever. I just got my punch in there, push down and over. You can see it. Boom. Pop that right up. Okay. We got the spring pressure off of that. Let's go ahead and slide that out. Now, I always like to leave my punches in there. That way I can see how things are coming out and I don't pull anything out too fast. And I always hold my finger on the top and slowly pull and feel it as it's coming through there. Because if anything's under spring pressure, you're going to feel it click. Yep, just like that. See, we had another piece under spring pressure. And that way, you don't just rip it out and it goes flying across the room. And actually, you can see this trigger pack was set up kind of like a Mossberg 500 for the safety piece that actuates in here. It's just a little different because it has a safety down here. Go ahead and pull this out. And if you notice, I never pull anything too fast because this down here is connected. See how that goes on that trigger? This piece sits into there to function off of that trigger, and the whole thing just kind of holds it in place. So we'll go ahead and work that out of there. There's your trigger spring. That's really not wanting to let go just yet. We can pop this puppy out if she'll come out. Nope. Yep, there we go. We got this puppy out. This is another thing too, and how I learned to do this was the hard way, and putting it all back together and everything is very hard way. Is because when I coat a firearm with Cerakote, I actually coat every single piece. I mean, there's a lot of Cerakoters out there that will not touch the internals of a gun. They will just, coat around them or whatever. And the problem is, if you coat a gun properly, you have to sandblast it. And all that sand ends up working in here. Well, what happens if you drop your shotgun in water? Guess what's going to rust? All these pieces you didn't want to coat. So know who's doing your coating work, and know what kind of work they do before you pay the money to have a coating done. I know I usually charged, back when I did it, I charged a couple $100 to do a shotgun, and people wonder why. Well, it's because we do it properly the first time, and, well, we'd warranty your coating for life. Okay, now we can see there's still spring pressure on the sear right here. This is the frontward sear that holds the hammer. See how that works. And there's spring pressure on that. It's very, very, very tricky. So the next thing we're going to remove is we're going to remove this bolt release, which is this middle pin. Take that out. Like I said, nice and slow, because there's going to be a couple of these in here. There's one that popped out. There's one how that went. Of course, this went around the backside, just like that. Hovered around the backside. Now we got one that sits right here around the front side, and this is a very tricky one to get in. Like I said, if you cannot do this on your own, consult a competent gunsmith and have them help you. You're going to see, even as much as I do know about guns, you're going to see how much trouble this gives me getting this back together, because these are not easy, and I haven't done it in a few years either. You got to pull that up and slide that over. Well, let's go ahead and get the hammer out first. I think that might be a little bit easier. There we go. Okay, now what you just saw happen, this sear in here just reset. It flapped down. I'm going to show you this sear. I mean, you can see from just, I've only shot this gun a few times before coating, but I want to, well, before we get too far, I want you to see how that spring goes. Okay, so that one goes like that. This other one will sit around the back side, such as this. It uses the spring pressure from the floor of the trigger pack to give it that upward force right there. Now, as you can see, this sear in here has reset itself. And you need to take note exactly how this spring sits. This is one of the most key parts to whether or not you're going to have a safe or unsafe firearm. And these sears are a pain to reset. Okay? See how that is. And, when you put the hammer in this thing, it takes like 5 or 6 hands to reset this sear. But I want you to see exactly how this sear sets up in here. Let's see if I can find a flashlight. Try this again. So the pin that this rests on is actually going upward, where this other one is sitting over the sear right there. And up in this corner, you can see how that little pin's sitting right there. And let me tell you, this thing is very difficult to get around, but I'll show you the trick into doing it once we pop it out. Pop it out upside down. Because it will fly. There's that sear spring. So when we come back, we will show you exactly how to get this puppy back together. Now that we've cleaned the trigger pack, we're going to go ahead and start reassembling it, which is fairly, can be a daunting task. So this piece is going to sit up in there just like that. That's exactly how the sear is going to go. So the best thing to do is just drop it in place. Take your pin, slowly work it in till you get a hold on it. Okay, slide it right there. And then comes the fun part, is putting this little booger in. So the spring sits exactly like that. And I would let this thing sit down so when that spring goes in, that one little piece hangs over the top of the spring, and then you can set it up into place. The easiest way to do this, well, there's really no easy way about it, but just get it in there to where it's set up in there just right. And I really prefer just using a pick for it. You got to make sure it sits over. Where did my pin go? Why did it fall out? Set that back in there. Okay. Flip it back. It goes in just like that. You gotta be very careful once you get it in there because it doesn't like staying. So what I like to do is I like to already have this pin in here, so when I take my punch and I put a little downward pressure on it, I got enough to hold it and I can just slide it right in like that. And look. Bingo. Own it. Don't get stuck in there either. That's exactly how it goes. So next we want to take our take this bolt release. We just clip this piece right over the front of the bolt release. And as this comes out, let me tell you, it's not as easy as it looks. It really is not as easy as it looks. But I could show you a few little tips and tricks to help you get around it. So what you do is you slide this in right here. And as I put this in, what I like to do is I like to take one of my pins, okay? Slide that pin through the hole in that spring. Then compress it down, okay? But before we get ahead of ourselves, because this trigger pack kind of goes together all at once. It's really weird how that happens. We got to put our safety in. Let's find our safety. Okay, the safety has a little knob right here. Just like that. Work it on through. That little knob will sit just like that. It'll straighten itself up once we get it in there and everything's set up in there properly. But that's how that goes, because there's going to be some springs and pieces hitting on that. So before I get that safety in though, what I want to do, I'm going to pry that back. I'm going to take the hammer. Now the hammer, of course, this slotted side faces the back towards the trigger. And I'm going to lift this up. Slide that puppy in there to hold that sear up. We're just going to put a pin in place. Ah, crap. Yeah, I'm telling you, this thing's fun. Okay. And this hammer can just float around in there. Nothing serious for now. We're going to keep it to one side. Okay. We're going to come in with this bolt hold open, or the bolt release for the bolt on the action. Okay. And this thing just kind of finagles over it. Just get it to wherever it's going to hold, because you're going to be doing a multi-step process here. Okay. Let it go in from the side. This thing's probably going to fall off a couple times on you and be a real pain in the butt. like it's being right now. Once you get the stinking hammer in, nothing likes complying. There. Okay. Follow that out. And once you get the hammer in, you can kind of pull this up. And forgive me because I'm doing this watching the screen on my phone. It makes it 10 times harder. Okay, now once we got it about like this, I want you to take this pin, hook the damn hole so this thing doesn't go anywhere. This way you can start to compress it if you even get it on. Ah, crap. All right. Okay. And once you get it on there, you got to kind of finagle this thing back and forth till you can get it in the hole. And that's, it can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. But you'll get it. You just got to keep kind of hammering away at it, and it eventually happens. I think at this point it's appropriate to throw the hammer back in its forward battery position. And we can take this little hammer pin right here, kind of push it out of the way so this little guy can fall down and do its thing. Telling you, this is a fun project, man. When you pull these things apart, you're going to be at it for a long time. One little trick you can use, you can run your punch through. Just like that. Okay? Just keep a little bit right there. Now, where this is going to sit, this spring in here, the bottom part of it, which is right there, it's going to sit a little under this hammer because we got to slide this hammer over all the way so we can push this pin all the way through. Then we want to take a compression tool like this, and it just has a little slot in it so it can get around springs. Just press down on it, slide your hammer over. It's to where it sits up like that. See it how it's sitting in there? That's what we want. Now, put our safety back in. Okay. Now comes the other tricky spring. Listen. So this is going to wrap over the other side of this and just go face down like that. Plain and simple. Now, it's better sometimes to get in here with some pliers or whatever. Or not even hook it around that. You can just kind of simply just push it down. You get it into place and then load the spring pressure. Which, of course, is easier said than done. And the point in doing this video is to show you why not to take apart your trigger pack, because they are not easy to put back together. Okay, so once it's like that, just slide it through. So it's a little bit on there. Then you come in with your pick. Just pull that side up over it. Make sure you seat it. And then this other arm, I don't know if you can see where it's going down in there, but it's not set right, so we want to come in and pull it into its slot. Hell, I'm even having trouble seeing it. There you go. Just like that. You kind of see where this slot is. There's a slot that's right here. There's a slot that's right here, and that's where that spring is. You want to make sure it's on that slot. Okay. So, you can run that over. I believe we can just run it all the way in there now. Yeah, let's leave it out for shits and giggles. Okay, so the next thing we want to get is trigger spring. Pop that in there. You just slide that puppy in. That's the way it's going to sit in there, just like that. Okay, and then there's this spring. This front end right here has to go underneath the sear, and then it's going to go through this hole. So the best way to do this, just kind of twist it in there till you feel it go under the sear. Push it down. You see it come through here. It should line right up with that hole if you got it in right. And what I like to do is I just like to put a pin through the front of it, just on the spring, okay? Because what's about to happen next is about to get real damn difficult. Get the wrong pin in here. It happens. There we go. Now we got the right pin in the hammer. That's why it was giving me such a trouble. Okay, so just squeeze that down, push it down with your thumb, slide that pin in till it's around it. Okay, and do not pin the trigger system yet, because we got a little kind of something or another to do here. So we need to make sure our hammer is fully extended forward. Just like that. Okay, that's in place. So we take this piece, go in forward first, going forward, and slide our trigger up, because there's a little slot right here. Make sure we hit into that slot. Actually, shit. I forgot to tell you something, and please do forgive me. It's been a while since I've done this. So let's get that out of there. So what we need to do when we do this, one, this hammer has to be all the way forward, but two, we got to actually pop the hammer access pin out a little ways, just like that. So you can still see it through there, but then we got to get this piece in through this slot. Should we just... I think we got to have both of these out. There we go. That's how it sits in there. So what we want to do is we want to make sure this is pinned. Bring that back. Pull that back. Take your trigger pin or your trigger spring. See, I can't even see on this camera sometimes. I just drop your trigger right in there. All right, just like that. And then you got to make sure it goes into that hole. And once you can finagle it in, do a little finagling until it lines up, if it lines up, and then, of course, springs are going to pop out of place and everything. That's fine. Just pop them back in. sometimes that spring really damn hurts because it will poke a damn hole in your finger. So just be careful. Okay. Now, one thing I would highly recommend you do is try to get this thing pushed into place, which it's supposed to sit up underneath. Like that. Pop your pin through. And then there is your trigger pack. Pop that through. Oh, shit. The hammer's about to come out. Oh, there we are. And it is really weird because the receiver actually holds all these pins in place. So once you get it back together, you just got to be really careful about how it's going to go forward. You don't want anything falling out of there. And the next task is to take these, and now obviously you see how this has an indentation on it. That's because this is going to sit on that hammer access pin, so you just throw that in forward, take it like this, till you get it on that deal set up just right there, which it wasn't. There's a little notch for it to go into. You want to set it up in that notch. See, it's on the notch now. Okay. Put it back. Take your plunger. Plunger goes in first. Okay. And make sure when you do this that your hammer's all the way forward, and it'll be a lot easier for you. What I like to do is I like to take that tool, the notching in it, push that down. If I don't skip over it. Take your pin in. Just start pushing the pin through. Just like that. And then once you get it almost to the edge, take a very, very thin punch. Push down. And then you can just push it right in. It doesn't even take any force. Be careful not to go all the way through. There you are. That's it. So now we want to check the function of our trigger pack. Obviously it fires. Hold your hand on the trigger. That sets back. Oh, you hear that? That's what we're going to hear. That's the sound we want to hear. That's the sear disengaging. That's what keeps it from going fully automatic. So now that the bolt's back, say we want to release our bolt, or that the hammer's back, we want to release our bolt. Take it out of battery. Reload the shell, or remove the shell that's in the gun. We should be able to push this up and have it return to its position. When we fire it, that thing should retract, and it should have spring pressure just like that. That's a trigger pack. Pretty simple. It looks simple, but it's not. So we're going to go ahead and finish up with the rest of the gun. And next we're going to start honing the bore. I don't know how good you're going to be able to see it, but all that rust in that bore right there. Look at that. That's pretty bad. Okay. There's a way to get rid of all that. It's not too shiny. It's a little dirty. But there's a lot of rust in that bore, and what had happened is that it got left out in the rain or something, and, well, that's what we're left with. So we're going to start honing out your shotgun bore. Now, it's not something you want to do every time you clean it, but if you get rust or debris or stuff that's not coming off with general cleaning, you want to use these flex hones, which are adaptable with your drill, and you run them through the bore a couple times, and they polish it up nice and clean. If you can see those real close, one's dark and one's light. The lighter one is the fine hone. The darker one's the coarse hone. So we'll run that coarse hone through there, then run the fine hone through there a few times. Before we do that, you need to use this flex hone oil by BRM. That's who manufactures the hones. I've never really used anything outside of BRM because they say to use it with their hones. That way you protect the finish and the abrasive properties of the hones. But you just simply run these back and forth in the bore with this oil on it, and it polishes it up pretty dang nice. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that and see what it looks like. Okay, so we're going to start with our coarse hone right here, the darker colored one. Oil it up. I just simply stick it right here in the oil. You just want to let it drain for a second. Get a towel, rag, because you are going to have a lot of oil flying around. So I'll do is I'll just run this into the bore. These things are a little long. You run this in just like you were cleaning. I keep my hand down here to keep it straight because the longer it gets, the more it likes to wobble. Okay, if you're done with that one, I like to wipe it off. Let's get the residual off, but it does a fairly good job. Now you see all this black stuff. I don't know if you can see it on the camera or not, but that stuff gets nasty because it polishes a fine amount of metal off. Like I said, you don't want to do this all the time, but if you have a really bad bore that's in need of polishing, save you the money on a new barrel. Get one of these Flex-Ons. They're pretty expensive. You can drop about $60 a piece on these. But they're worth having if you're a gunsmith and looking to spice up your customer's bore for them. You can make some good money off of it. Same thing. Go ahead and run the fine one in. Nice and smooth. Same consistent speed on each pass. Third one. And one more. Then what we'll do is we'll wipe this bore out and we'll take a look at it. See how our polishing job did. Now that we've gotten the deal back here, we want to clean the crap that's out in this bore. We want to get it out of there. And I like to use, now, bore snakes. I'm going to talk about these for a second. Because, and the reason I use these is I've seen more damage because of brass cleaning rods to bores than I've seen from actually shooting with them, because a lot of people, they really clean a lot and stuff, and those bass rods, they do stroke the rifling and the bores, and when you look at them through a bore scope, a lot of people have seen more damage just from cleaning rods than actually shooting your own firearm. So I'm a big advocate of these bore snakes. They work great. Now, if you ever hone your bore, I'm going to tell you, to save your bore snake, I would not run this through first. Cut a piece of cloth out and run that through. Let me see if I got a long piece of rod. I just like using the back end of this. I don't use cleaning rods. Run that through. The great thing about these is they're rubber coated. They have a rubber coating on them. It's just right there, but you make sure you push that center of the towel. You come out. Look how dirty that puppy is. Snake it through one more time. Now what we'll do, pull this snake through. So now that we snaked it, look down that bore. You can see it's an older bore. It's and you know, my hones are well used. I've had some that polish out to a mirror finish, and this one, it's all right. It's not the best, but it's just because, you know, my hones are very, very old. I've probably honed a good about 100 shotguns with these things, and over time they start to wear out and they don't work as effective as they used to. Like I said, you don't want to do this too much on guns, but you know, it is what it is. This is a home defense gun. Not really built for accuracy, but it's definitely a yeah. But all the rust that was there, as we can see, let me get my light here. See, those hones will pull that rust right out of that bore. No rust in there. And probably need to get to ordering some new hones here, because I was actually surprised that it didn't come out as shiny as I was looking for. But yeah, they work pretty good. They make them for all sorts of calibers. You can get them for 9mm, 45s, rifles, shotguns, 12, 16, 20, 10, 28 gauge, 410s. They make them all sorts of damn calibers. But again, yeah, I like using the bore snakes because they're easy on the bore. They clean and they remove. And, Hops number 9 makes these bore snakes, man. And tell you what, I've fallen in love with them. When I started researching barrel technology and stuff, and the barrel making industry as a whole, man, they love it when you snake those brass cleaning rods through, man, because it can mess up your deal. That's why they sell those guide rods and stuff. Personally, you know, they say breaking in bores, all that crap about breaking in a rifle bore. Do a little research on it. See what you find. It's actually barrel makers come up with that. It's a complete lie. Barrel makers have come up with that. I mean, there's a certain level of break-in you have to do, but not to the extent that the manufacturers tell you. And what they're hoping that you do is you keep snaking that bore, and then you end up just having to get a new one. So they push for that, so they sell more barrels. Interesting article I found on that by a prominent barrel maker. You know, he taught people to do this, and some of the people he even taught to make barrels have come up with this scam. It's actually an Australian guy. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and start putting this gun back together. And if you notice, I was using WD-40. I don't use it to lubricate. I use it to clean, because that's what it's better as a cleaner. You know, if you get crayons on the wall or something, it does better cleaning than it does oiling. So I actually use that just as a cleaning tool. Take this, and a little mag pin in there, just like that. Put your finger up through here, get it on there. Here you are, just like that. Take your bolt, slide your bolt in. So slide the bolt in. We want to slide the pump into the 2 slots in the front like that. Slide it on through. Continue to bring your bolt back. Take this piece, and just like that. Slide it in just like that. And you see you got the operation. That's exactly what we're looking for. Yep. Take a barrel. Yeah, we actually missed one critical step. Don't forget to put in the ejector. There we go. Now we'll slide this back in. Kind of went in a little too easy. Plop it so it locks up in place. It's like that. Slide it forward. Take your barrel. Slide the barrel in. I'm going to take these pieces, slide them in. That. They like to fall out. Once you get them in, they pretty much stay. That. Slide that forward. Okay. Take the trigger back. Need the trigger back in, which holds these shell releases. Put your pin. Just like that. It should be locked as the hammer's forward. Boom. Just like there. Put your grip back on. Finally, once it's all together, the last thing I advocate you do is a function check. Make sure the gun is unloaded. No shells. Get your finger in there. Pull it forward. Pull the trigger. You hear the hammer hit. Rack it again. and you want to listen for this click when you release the trigger. You want to hear that click. That's sear clicking back so it'll fire. And one last thing I like to do. So right now, there should be one in the chamber. There would be one chambered. And if we wanted to unload that, we'd want to press the bolt release, make sure that functions. So right now we have a functioning Maverick 88. For more videos like this, go online to restoretherepublicshow.com, where me, Kevin Blake, host of the Restore the Republic Show, will show you how to fix, repair, and clean your guns properly. Thanks. Like and subscribe.